Julian Dent is chairman of VIA Consulting. Julian is an expert on routes to market and the distribution channel, and is giving a keynote at this year's DISTREE XXL. Julian, could you tell us about the main topics that you'll be covering in your keynote?
Yes, certainly. I'm going to cover three things in my presentation. The first is how to deal with the credit crunch that's going on right now with the difficulty of obtaining credit or rolling over credit facilities. Secondly, I'm going to address the fact that we are now in a recession that has come about more quickly than any before and will last for we don't know how long, so how to manage through the recession. And thirdly, and very importantly, is to make sure that distributors know how they can be positioned to take advantage of the uptake when it happens, that they haven't managed themselves into such a position that they have simply survived, but they have no prospects for ongoing growth and profit improvement.
So do you view the credit crunch and the recession as two separate issues? I mean, obviously they're intertwined, but do you see them as two separate things for distributors to deal with?
Yes, I do. I think obviously they're very closely linked in both their cause and effect, but also I think from a distributor's point of view, the credit crunch is all about credit availability, whether or not you can roll over your credit facilities and use credit, and that in itself is enough of a problem. But the recession is another thing altogether. The recession is operating with lower levels of demand, and businesses that have created infrastructure and capabilities in their businesses for one level of demand and a planned level of growth are now facing the fact that that demand has fallen away and may be at lower levels for a while, and surviving with that kind of a pressure is, I think, separate, but the two together is a real crisis for many distributors.
So what are the practical steps that distributors should be taking in terms of financial management at the moment?
Well, I think there are three things that distributors should focus on. The first is that they need to manage capital, whatever capital they have in their business, extremely tightly, and I'm going to talk in my presentation about the kinds of measures that they should use. Typically, they're quite different to the ones that they might have used to date. And the focus on managing the productivity of capital and working capital in particular is one whole set of areas. The second is looking at how their customers and their vendors use and possibly even abuse the capital that they make available to them in terms of the way their business model works inside the distributor. And we'll talk also about how you can measure the growth, as we call it, the internal growth capability of a distributor, and how that looks for each individual vendor or customer segment, because different vendors, different customer segments have very different uses of working capital, or the demands they make on working capital of a distributor, and therefore the ability of the distributor to grow with that particular vendor or into that particular customer segment.
Obviously in the past the distribution sector has experienced tough times after the dot-com revolution, for example. Have they learned lessons from that to prepare them for what's happening now? That's
the tough question everyone's asking in every sector. Have the bankers learned? Has everyone learned? And I think the challenge here is that actually distribution as a business model runs to very, very tight margins of error. The difficulty, I think, is that those margins of error have been completely overridden by the dramatic shift in business. So my fear is that there aren't many people around in distribution who've perhaps been through some of the previous tough times and seen quite how much of a change they have to make in their business to get through the current situation without completely destroying the basics of their business model. So I'm not sure. I think we're going to find some who have and some who haven't.
Is it all doom and gloom in the market, or are there bright spots? I mean, is there underlying demand that will carry on? Distributors will have a long-term business going forwards?
Yes, I think it's easy to get carried away and become too depressed about the situation. I think one of the great joys of working in the technology sector is that there are always new technologies coming through that unlock demand, at the end customer, and therefore feeds through to distribution through the reseller tier. The question really is, are those changes and are those demands going to be coming through quickly enough to cater for the fact that generally businesses are clamping down on capital expenditure, looking to delay product rolls and those kinds of things. But I think it's important that we don't get too negative about it. We do assume that we'll get through it. We just need to make sure we manage our business for that so that we are available and around to take advantage of the upside.
And Julian, you've published a book on the subject of distribution channels. Could you tell us what's included in that book and what benefits it will bring to the readers?
Yes, I mean the book is very much focused on the economics, or as we call it, the business model. It's written in 4 sections. The first of these talks about the distributor and their business model. The second talks about the reseller and their business model, and therefore if you're selling into resellers and how to engage with their business model. The third section talks very much about retailers and how to engage with retailers. And throughout the book, it sets up the basic understanding of all the economics and financial and business terms in plain English, so that someone who hasn't got a background in finance and doesn't deal with finance on every day-to-day basis can still read it and get a lot out of it.
Julian, thank you very much and enjoy DISTREE XXL.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.